Masechet Shevuot, Daf Yod Aleph. On the previous daf, we saw a controversy between Rabbah and Rav Chisda. Rabbah cited Rabbi Yochanan approvingly, saying that if you have a korban that was consecrated to be a korban tzibur and was paid for by the machasita shekel from last year, and now Rosh Chodesh Nisan came, and now we can't use it anymore. So we have this nice animal, it's not blemished. Rabbi Yochanan says you can redeem it. It's no problem. You just redeem it for money. And then the animal that was consecrated to be a korban becomes a regular animal. So Rabbah was repeating this, and Rav Chisda heard that and said, "What? That's crazy. How can you say that? Kedusha sheben lehechan alcha. Where does the holiness go? It just goes to nowhere? It's got to go somewhere. You can't just redeem a consecrated animal." So Rabbah responded and said, "No, you won't. Don't you agree that kedusha can in fact go away? Because look at this Mishnah Shekalim about ketoret. The same thing about ketoret. You prepared it from last year, and now you want to use it for the upcoming year. No problem. You do this four-way transaction, and then you can redeem the ketoret, and then you buy it back with the next year's funds. So you see that ketoret, you can do this procedure. So it's possible to undo the holiness of the ketoret, and just like you can do it for ketoret, so too you can do it for a sacrificial animal in the same scenario where it was bought from last year's funds, and now you want to redeem it and buy it again with this year's funds. So therefore, Rabbah says, right, what's the problem of the Kedusha sheben lechan alcha? Yes, you can do it. Why don't you ask the same thing regarding Ketoret? And Rav Chisda says, I actually have an answer. You can't compare Ketoret with an animal. Ketoret ka'amart, shane Ketoret k'de Kedushat damim hu. Ketoret has only monetary holiness. There's two levels of holiness. Monetary holiness is when you sanctify anything, any item, a table, a chair, you can donate it. It's the Bet HaMikdash doesn't need the item itself. It's not, you don't put a chair on as a sacrifice. So you're just donating the monetary value. Anytime you want, you can redeem it for money, and then you can give the money instead or buy something else instead. That's easy to do, and that's why Ketoret, you can simply redeem it. However, Kedushat Haguf, that's intrinsic holiness, that's for something like a korban or like Ketoret, that is actually put on the mizbeach. Now, actually, an animal and ketoret, since they could be both ways. Because if I have an animal and I say I want to donate it, but only for its monetary value. So an animal, especially if it's not an animal that can be sacrificed, would be only its monetary value. We're going to get to that more later. So, but if you say this animal is a korban, then it has intrinsic holiness. Intrinsic holiness, that's much harder to get rid of that kedusha. And so therefore, Rav Chisda says, there's a difference. Ketoret has only regular holiness, kedushat damim, of monetary holiness, whereas an animal has intrinsic holiness. So my question stands, you can't just redeem a consecrated animal. And here's where we begin the discussion for today. Ela me'ata lo תיפסל בטבול יום. על המתניה נתנה במכתשת נפסלת בטבול יום. Rabbah says, according to you, if in fact you're right that ketoret is only monetary, then it should not become tameh by a tvul yom touching it. The word pasul, when it comes to tumah, means it becomes tameh, but it's the end of the line. It won't make anything else tameh. But when you see pasul, you could just say tameh. Okay, it makes it tameh, although not a low-level tameh such that it doesn't pass on. And a Tevul Yom is a person who was tameh in the morning. He went to the mikveh in the middle of the day, but he's not fully tahor until nightfall. During the day, after the mikveh and before nightfall, is called a Tevul Yom. He can do in some ways he's tahor, and for some laws he's still tameh. If he would touch terumah or sacrificial meat, then he will make those things tameh. But if he touches chulin, regular food, he will not make it tameh. So, if you say that the ketoret is only kedushat damim, that's a low-level holiness, then a tevul yom should not make it holy, should not make it tameh if he touches it. Whereas if you say that it's kedushat haguf, then the tevul yom will make it tameh, like sacrificial meat is kedushat haguf, and he makes it tameh. So that would be the conclusion according to you, but there's a braita that contradicts it. Allah matanya, netana b'machteshet nifselt b'tvul yom. There's a braita that says that if you take the ketoret and you put it in a mortar and pestles, because you're going to grind it and get it ready, then it will become tameh by a tvul yom. We learn from here that ketoret, the ketoret ingredients, even before they are put on the mizbeach and actually used, a tvul yom who touches it does make it tameh. That proves that ketoret ingredients are in fact intrinsic holiness. So Rabbah says, you see, I think that they are the same. Both korban and ketoret have intrinsic holiness, and therefore I can't compare one to the other. And just like you can redeem one, you can redeem the other. V'chitema kol kedushat amim mipasele b'tvul yom, v'hatenan hamenachot mo'alin bahen mishehu kedushu, kadshu bekli, huchsheru lipasel b'tvul yom, u'b'mechusar kippurim, u'belina. And if you should say that the kedushat damim, even monetary holiness, becomes tameh when a tvul yom touches it, maybe you'll say, oh, tvul yom, he can make tameh not only things with intrinsic holiness, but even things with monetary holiness. If you should think that, well then, don't think that it can't be, because of this Mishnah in Masechet Me'ilah that's talking about meal offerings. It says one commits Me'ilah once they are consecrated. Once someone says, this flour, I'm going to use it for a korban mincha, so you set it aside, and that's low level, just monetary holiness. And if someone would take it and use it for some other purpose, not for the korban, then they commit Me'ilah. That's step one. Kadshu bakli, once you give it to the Kohen and the Kohen puts it in a Bet HaMikdash vessel, then it gets intrinsic holiness. And at that point, it becomes susceptible to become tameh if a tvul yom touches it, or someone who is mechusar kippurim. That's someone who is tameh. He went to the mikveh and even waited till nightfall. But it's someone like a zav or your ledet, someone who still has to bring a korban in order to become fully tahor. And so that kind of person will still make intrinsic holy things tameh, and so that they become tameh because they're high level consecration. So tvul yom chasar kippurim, who touches it will make it tameh. Also, once the meal offering is put into a holy vessel, then it's you can violate lina. That means that you can't leave it overnight without sacrificing it. This applies to korbanot. You do shechita to a korban. So now you have the blood. You have to do the blood ritual. You have to take it, sprinkle on the mizbeach, and do all the things. You have to do it during the day. That day, you can't leave it till tomorrow. It goes bad by tomorrow. And so once it's put it in a kli, you have to do it that day. Before you put it into the holy vessel. So if I say I set aside flour, okay, I put it on the side, I can bring it tomorrow, I can bring it next week, or whenever I get a chance to bring it. But once it's put in the holy vessel, it has to be completed that day. Otherwise, one violates lina. That's what the Mishnah says. Rabbah infers from this, kadeshu bakli in, lo kadeshu bakli la. Only if you make it holy by putting the meal offering into a vessel, that's when it becomes tameh if a tvul yom touches it. But if not, if you just set it aside and it has only kiddushat damim, then a tvul yom who touches it does not make it tameh. So you see here that a tvul yom touching something that is kiddushat damim does not make it tameh. And over here, since it says that ketoret, once you put it in the mortar, tvul yom touches it does become tameh. Well, you see, so you can prove from here that it can't be that it's kiddushat damim. Otherwise, a tvul yom would not make it tameh. Instead, we see that ketoret ingredients, right? The ingredients are just sitting there, but they're ready for use. Then, you put it in the mortar, so you're getting it ready for use. It already has kedushat haguf, and that's why a tvul yom touches it does become tameh. Since ketoret ingredients have kedushat haguf, and therefore they are that's called intrinsic holiness. They are comparable to a korban that also was consecrated, and just like the ketoret, you can redeem it and then buy it with next year's funds. So too, you can do the same with a consecrated animal. That is Rabbah's proof. Ra'elamai kedushat hagufi. So now Rav Chisda responds, okay, so what are you arguing, Rabbah? that ketoret ingredients have kedushat haguf, intrinsic holiness, ela me'ata tipasel belina. In that case, you shouldn't be able to leave it overnight. What they would usually do actually is prepare a lot of ketoret, all the ingredients, early on, and they'd have a lot to use for months to come. But according to this, you have to make every day. You'd have to make more ketoret ingredients because you would violate lina. If it has intrinsic holiness, then you should violate lina. And we see in the following Mishnah in Masechet Me'ilah. למה תנן הקומץ והלבונה והקטורת ומנחת כהנים ומנחת כהן משוח ומנחת נסכים מועלין בהן מי שהוקדשו. קדשו בכלי, הוכשרו להיפסל בטבול יום ובמחוסר כיפורים ובלינה. So how can we explain this Mishnah that says Kometz is the handful of meal offering that the Kohen takes with his middle fingers. He smooths it out with the outer fingers. That's the part of the meal offering that will be put on the Mizbeach. So that flour and also the libona, the frankincense, is brought with the mincha meal offering, and also ketoret and the korban mincha that a Kohen brings. If a Kohen brings a korban mincha, then no Kohanim eat it. Usually, if someone else brings a korban mincha, the kometz is put onto the mizbeach and the kohanim eat the rest. But when the kohanim bring a korban for themselves, then it's all burnt. And also the mincha of the kohen gadol. Every day he has to bring a special korban, a special mincha offering, and also mincha offerings that are brought together with animal korbanot. They come alongside it. In all these cases, all these items, this flour and the levona and the ketoret, if one uses it for oneself, they commit me'ilah. Once you designate, you put it set aside, this I'm going to use for a mincha offering or for ketoret, then it already attains a low level of kedushat tamim, and it's already going to be me'ilah. And then, kadshu bakli, if the Kohen put it into a temple vessel, once he, let's say, does the kimisai, puts it into a temple vessel, at that point, it becomes susceptible to tum'ah if a tuvul yom or mechusar kippurim touches it, because now it's already kedushat haguf. This is serious. And so it's more susceptible to tum'ah, and it's subject to lina. It cannot be it cannot rest till the next day. You have to sacrifice it, do everything that day, and not wait till the next day. Now, with Rav Chisda, infers from this Mishnah, kachu bekli'in, lo kachu bekli la. Only if one sanctifies ketoret and all these other things in a temple vessel, then it's liable to lina. But if not, then it's not liable to lina. And so that backs up the question here. Rabbah, are you really saying that ketoret has kedushat haguf? If it has kedushat haguf, then it should be liable to lina even before it's put into a temple vessel, because that kedushat haguf should come along as it does with an animal that is, if it has kedushat haguf, once you slaughter the animal, you have to sacrifice it on that day. Now it's ready to be used, it's consecrated, kedushat haguf, so you have to use it that day. So too, if ketoret had kedushat haguf, then it should be liable to lina even before it's put into a temple vessel. That's Rav Chisda's question. And Rabbah answers, Amar le, lina ka'amart, shane ketoret ho'il v'surata b'chol hashana kula. He says, are you discussing lina? Ketoret is different because the ketoret retained its form all year round. If you have ketoret, even though you consecrated it, if you leave it, it doesn't disintegrate, it doesn't decay, it stays good. You put it in a jar and then you can use it, and a few days from now, you could use it a few months from now, all year round. That's not the same with meat. If you have meat and you leave it out even for one day, it's going to start to spoil. Therefore, regarding meat, you have the law of lina. That's it. Once it's slaughtered, you have to do it on that day. However, ketoret, even though it is kedushat haguf, that's what Abba says, still, even though it's kedushat haguf, because it doesn't deteriorate, therefore the law of lina does not apply to it. before it's put into the vessel, even though it does have kedushat haguf even beforehand. But only once you put it into the vessel, okay, then you have to take care of it right away. And that's how Rabbah is able to defend himself. Mikol makom kashya. Okay, Rav Chisda, we can still go back to his initial question. V'chi kedusha shebehen lehechan halcha. Okay, still you have to explain, where did the holiness go? How can you just get rid of holiness? Even if it's true, the same is true for ketoret, or not the same as ketoret, there's the machloket there. But regarding the animal, where does the holiness go? Amar Rabbah, lebetin matne alehen, im usrechu usrechu, v'im lav yihu lidmehen. And the answer is that the court, even if it doesn't say it explicitly, it's implicit in what they say. Lev is there, subconsciously. The Bet Din makes a condition and says, listen, when we say that these animals are going to be used for the korban tamid, and we're going to buy it with machasita shekel, or applying this to ketoret also, if you want to, according to Rabbah you would, then when we buy the ketoret with the money of machasita shekel, there's an implicit condition. If we need it for this year, then we will need it and we will use it. And if not, then we do not want these things to have intrinsic holiness, but rather only monetary holiness. And that's why there's a condition fixed into the original sale, the original consecration, that if we don't need it, then it's a low level. And in fact, we didn't need it. Rosh Chodesh came and went, and therefore we have this animal. Oh, it's only kedushat damim, and this ketoret only kedushat damim, and that's how Rabbah can answer the mechanisms of how one can redeem something that is intrinsically holy, because otherwise, generally, you cannot do that. Amar le Abaye, v'hamor hu da'amar higdish zachar ledamav kadosh kedushat haguf. Abaye challenges Rabbah, his teacher, and he says, Master, but didn't you yourself say that if someone consecrates an animal, a male ram, that can be used as a sacrifice, even though he says, I want this to be holy only for its monetary value. Even though he says that, nevertheless, it has intrinsic holiness as a korban, because it's an animal that can be brought as a korban, so automatically it becomes kedushat haguf and not kedushat damim. If so, then it doesn't make sense that the court can make a condition, because even if someone says, this animal, I want it to be kedushat damim only, it becomes kedushat haguf anyway. So therefore, if the Bet Din makes a condition, and that in this over here, it's only an implicit condition at that, and says, well, if it's required, then it'll be a sacrifice. But if it's not required, it'll be kedushat tamim. That condition won't work, because the second it's kedushat tamim, it turns into kedushat haguf, because that's what Abaye said. Abaye says that's what Rabbah himself said, that if it's a sacrificial animal, it's going to get kedushat haguf automatically. So then you won't be able to redeem it. La kashya hadamar lidme ola, hadamar lidme nesachim. No, when Rabbah said that law, he didn't mean across the board. It depends. If someone said, I want this animal to be holiness for the monetary value of an olah, korban olah. Because he mentioned korban olah in there, even though he said monetary value, it becomes intrinsically holy as an olah. However, if he said, for it's the monetary value of libations, an animal can't be a libation. It's not wine, it's not flour, it can't be a libation, and therefore it does not apply as intrinsic holiness, but only monetary holiness. So you see, it actually is possible as long as you don't say olah. And when the court makes that implicit condition, they're not saying lidmeh olah. They really want it to be only for monetary value, so it is possible to make an animal only monetarily holy. איתי אביה, פר ושעיר של יום הכיפורים שעבדו והפריש אחרים תחתיהם, וכן שעירי עבודה זרה שעבדו והפריש אחרים תחתיהם, כולן ימותו, דברי רבי יהודה. רבי אלעזר ורבי שמעון אומרים, יראו עד שיסתעבו וימכרו ויפלו דמיהן לנדבה, שאין חטאת ציבור מתה. Abaya challenges this once again. If you say that there is a condition that the Bet Din implicitly puts on any animal communal offering that is sanctified, and then if it's not used, used, you can just redeem it for money. It's only Kiddushat Damim. Well, how can that square with the following Baraita that says, if you have a Pad or Sa'ir of Yom Kippur and it gets lost, and then you get other ones instead of them, and then you find the original ones. So now what are you going to do? You can't use both of them. Or if you have a Sa'ir that's brought as a communal offering to atone for Avodah Zarah, and then you lost them, and you brought other ones instead of them, and then you found them, the ones that you found, the original ones that were lost, and now that you found, you have to leave them to die because they are holy, and there's no way to undo that holiness, according to the Yehuda. You can't simply redeem it. Why don't we apply here the condition of the Bet Din, the implicit condition that if this ends up not being usable, then it's only Kiddushat Damim, and then you'd be able to simply redeem it. But the Yehuda doesn't say that. He says you have to leave it to die. And similarly, the other opinion here, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, they say that an animal that you consecrated for a communal offering, and then you lost it. You brought other ones instead of them, and then you found it, so you don't have to leave them to die. You just let them graze until they get a blemish. Once they get a blemish, then you can sell them, and the money you will use to buy korban nedava. And so then, yes, afterwards you can sell it, and then it becomes not consecrated anymore through that. But first you have to let it get a blemish, and then only then you can exchange it for money, and then use the money for other korbanot. Because they say that a chatat that belongs to the sibur, you don't just let it die. You don't have to leave it, let it to die, but rather you wait till it gets a blemish. But still, you have to wait till it gets a blemish. So according to them, also the same thing. If the court has an implicit condition that says that it's only Kiddushat Damim, then you don't have to leave it to get a blemish. Even whilst unblemished, you should be able to redeem it. So for both of these opinions, we say, why do you have to let it die or get a blemish? Why don't we say that the Bet Din makes an implicit condition that if it's not used and not usable, then you will only have Kiddushat Damim. So you see, this is a challenge. How can you say over here that there's always such a condition? And the answer is, Avudin kamat shane avudin de la shechiche. You bring a question from cases of lost animals, that's different because that it's not common that we lose an animal. Well, generally, you have an animal, it's going to be a sa'ir, special sa'ir for a communal chatat offering, so they can keep it in a special place. You're not going to just lose it. So the rabbis are not going to make an condition, even an implicit condition, on a case that's not common. However, cases that are common, they do. That's when they make this takana to make this condition. And having leftover animals from the previous fiscal year is a very common thing. You have so many animals, so you have to want to prepare them. You set them aside. Okay, now they're consecrated. So this is going to happen often that there's going to be leftover animals. That's why they made the implicit condition, not for an unusual case. Hare para de la shechicha. But now we have a question from para aduma, which is not a common case. There's very few para adumas, and yet look at what this baraita teaches about para aduma. Para niftet al kol pasul sheba meta tipade nishcheta tipade masa acheret nahemena tipade shechata al gabe marachata en la pediya olamit. The baraita teaches that if you have a para aduma and it gets a blemish, you can simply redeem it. If it dies, then you can redeem it even after it died. If it was slaughtered but not in the right place, not on Hadazetim, then you redeem it. Even after it's slaughtered, you redeem its value. Or even if you found a nicer cow, you have this cow, you set it aside, para aduma, and then someone comes along, you have a nicer cow. What about the old one that was consecrated to be a para aduma? So just redeem it. And however, if it was slaughtered in the right place, on Hadazitim in the right way, then once it's slaughtered, that's already officially para aduma and cannot be redeemed ever. So we see from here that you can redeem a para aduma, not only if it gets a blemish or something wrong, even if you just found a nicer one, then you just simply redeem it. Now, this is not a usual case, so we wouldn't say over here that, the court is making an implicit condition that if the para aduma will be used, then it's consecrated Kiddushat Haguf. But if you don't use it, it's only Kiddushat Damim. The court wouldn't we just said that the court does not make a special condition on an unusual case, and this is an unusual case. So therefore, why should it be permitted to easily redeem it just because you found another one? The answer is Shane Para de Kodshe Bedek Habayit. No, Para Aduma is different because it's only Bedek Habayit, it's only Kiddushat Damim the whole time. Why is that? It's actually not a korban. It's not sacrificed. It's slaughtered on Har HaZitim, and then you sprinkle the blood from Har HaZitim, the next mountain over, towards the Kodesh Kodashim. But it's not sprinkled on the Mizbeach, not brought on the Mizbeach at all. And in fact, if it were a korban, you would have to slaughter it in the Bet HaMikdash. You wouldn't be able to slaughter it outside. So you see, it's not a korban. It does not get Kiddushat Haguf at all. It's always Kiddushat Bedek Habayit, and that's an easy one. You don't need a condition for that. It's always Kiddushat Damim. Iachi meta o nishchata tipade habainen hamada v'haracha. Hold on. If you say that it's only Kiddushat Bedek Habayit, and that's why you can redeem it. Well, what about the case when it dies, or it dies on its own, or you did shechita in the wrong place? How can you redeem it? Don't you have to stand it up and make an evaluation? The pasuk says that if you're going to make a redemption, it has to stand and stand before the kohen, who makes an evaluation of how much it's worth. But it can only stand if it's alive, and you can't stand it up and evaluate it if it's dead. So how can we redeem it if it died? The answer is we can follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says that this law applies only to animals that are consecrated for the Mizbeach. There, it has to stand up in order to be praised. If it can't stand, if it's not alive, then you can't do it. But if it has only Kiddushat Damim, it's only sanctified to be used for its monetary value by the Bet HaMikdash, then it does not have to stand and be appraised. One can redeem it even without that. Now we ask, Rabbi Shimon emasefa shechata al gabe marachata en la pediya olamit. If you conclude that this Baraita follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, then you will have a problem with the continuation of the Baraita that says if one slaughters a Para Aduma in the proper place on the arrangement of wood that's on the Mount of Olives, then one cannot redeem it at all, ever. But that would contradict something that Rabbi Shimon said. Rabbi Shimon himself said that a Para Aduma can become susceptible to Tum'ah as food does. Food is more susceptible to Tum'ah than other things that are objects or things that are not edible. Why will it may become Tameh like food? Because at some point it was kosher to eat. Now the question is, when was it kosher to eat? V'amar Resh Lakish Omer Haya Rabbi Shimon Para niftet al gabe ma'arachta. Resh Lakish says that, it quotes Rabbi Shimon as saying that Para Aduma can be redeemed even after it's slaughtered on the wood pile that in a proper way on the Mount of Olives. And so, when would it be edible? Well, if it was a korban, obviously, then it would not be edible. You do a shechita on a korban, that's consecrated, and you can't do anything about that. You can't redeem it. But the Para Aduma, you do shechita on it, and now if you say it's not redeemable, well, then you can't redeem it. It's holy. It's a sacred meat. It's never kosher, so then it should not become tameh as food. However, the Shakish explains that according to the Rabbi Shimon, it can be redeemed even after it's slaughtered. And if you would redeem it, it would be kosher meat. You'd be able to eat it. So since that's a possibility, therefore it becomes tameh. So this contradicts the continuation, the end of the Baraita. The end of the Baraita says, if it's properly slaughtered, then it cannot be redeemed. And here, Resh Lakish quotes Rabbi Shimon as saying that if it's properly slaughtered, it can be redeemed. And therefore, we have to find a new answer. We cannot say that Para Aduma can be redeemed because we're following the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who said it's only Bedek Habayit, and therefore we don't have to stand it up and praise it because that's no longer true. This Baraita cannot be the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So, back to the question, how come a Para Aduma can be redeemed, even if you just find another one that is like it. We said that the rabbis do not make a condition when it comes to a rare occurrence, and paraduma is a rare occurrence. So why would they make a condition regarding paraduma? And the answer is Ela shane parahu ilvedameha yekarin. Paraduma is different because it is of such great monetary value. So even though we only do a paraduma once in a long time, so it is very rare. So generally the rabbis are not going to make a takana for it. However, because the paraduma is so expensive and we want to avoid a big loss, therefore the rabbi said, you know what, even though it's rare, we're going to make a condition that if for whatever reason this paraduma is not going to be used, it's okay, you can redeem it for money, and that's why it's permitted to redeem, because it has this condition built in. Amar mor meta tipadeh v'chi podin et hakodashim la'achilan le'kelabim. Now back to that braita, we quote the section that says if it dies, then it should be redeemed. It died on its own, not usable, not through shechita, just died. Then you can redeem it. Now what are you going to do with it? It died. It's not kosher, so you can't use it for paraduma. You can't eat it, so you're going to redeem it. And then what? What will you do with the rest of the animal after you redeem it? You're redeeming it so that you can feed it to the dogs? Is that a good reason? Is that something that would be respectful to feed this something that you set aside for paraduma and feed it to the dogs? Amar Rav Mishashia mishum ora. Rav Mishashia says no. We are redeeming it so that we can use the hide, because the hide is something valuable. Vekami ben bet din umatnu adata de ora. Hold on. The bet din is going to make a condition just for the hide. I mean, the flesh, that would be a lot of money if one could eat it, but you can't eat it. So just for the hide, they're going to go and make a condition to make sure that you can redeem it, because they want to avoid a big loss. Is that a big loss if you would lose the use of the hide? Amar Rav Kahana amri nashe mi gamla unaha. Indeed, yes, it is. As Rav Kahana said, from a camel, even just the ear. If you have a camel and you can get the skin of the ear, even though it's a very small amount, that's very valuable. And certainly if it's the whole animal. And so that's true for paraduma also. The skin of a whole cow is very valuable, has so many uses, and therefore, yes, the rabbis went out of their way and made a condition just for paraduma, even though it's very rare, because it's expensive and they want to avoid people suffering a financial loss. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen.